Plastic litter occurs in a wide range of sizes. Everything from some items that are so big you could see them from satellites in space, right down to pieces that are so small they're below the level of detection for our best analytical equipment. Microplastics are at the small end of the size spectrum. When we first described them in 2004, we were talking about pieces that were truly microscopic. But now the widely accepted formal definition by policymakers is anything smaller than 5 millimeters, right down to the lowest limit of our detection. Now they're increasing for a number of reasons, and that relates to the sources. One of the biggest sources of microplastic is likely to be the fragmentation of other items of litter in the environment. The large items we're familiar with, plastic bottles, plastic packaging, rope and netting. Over time, it breaks into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces, eventually becoming microplastics. There are also some direct inputs of very small sized pieces directly to the environment. This can come from fibers wearing away from textiles, from particles wearing from the tires on your car as you drive along the road, but also from products containing small pieces of plastic, like some cosmetic products. And in some countries we've started to see legislation to prohibit the use of microplastics in some of those products.
Thank you very much. So I think most people are aware that large plastic items can cause a problem to the large marine mammals that we see in the sea. You may have seen pictures of birds feeding plastic items to their young, or seals or dolphins become entrapped in fishing gear which has been left in the ocean. But it's much more difficult to know the problem that these really small plastics have on the animals in the environment. Because the plastics are very small, they're the same size as the food or the prey of many different animals. So we've shown that they are eaten by everything from tiny copepods, zooplankton, at the very base of the food chain, all the way up to turtles or to seals or to whales. So we know that they're eaten, but it's much more difficult to know what problem this causes. With some of the small invertebrates, like the zooplankton, we can do experiments in the laboratory to help inform us what will happen if they eat these microplastics. And we found that if they do eat the microplastics, they eat less of their normal food. And that means they feel fuller and they don't have as much energy because they can't eat their normal food. Therefore, they don't reproduce as well, they don't live as long, and it's not very good for their health. If we don't stop plastics getting into the ocean, then there will be a problem to the small and the larger animals that live there. Also to the ecosystems which those animals really support, and to the benefits that we gain from the ocean, things like the fish that we take. It's much more difficult to know what impact it will be when we look at humans, because we can't do experiments on humans. We're very much hoping that we don't get enough plastic to cause a problem to humans, but we really do have to stop the plastic now. Certainly. At the moment we're producing and we're using far too much plastic. So the best way to stop that is to actually reduce the amount of plastic we use. To try and refuse plastic if we don't really use it. Perhaps I can give an example of drinking water. If you live in a fantastic country like Japan, you could actually refuse to drink water from a plastic bottle. You could have water from the tap in a glass instead. If you do have to drink water from a plastic bottle, then maybe you could reuse that bottle time and time again. That way you're certainly reducing the amount of plastic that you use. You could also have an alternative. Perhaps you could have a metal drinking bottle that you can fill up time and time again. Further down that list, yes, if you do have a plastic bottle, then it could be recycled. But you have to remember that when we recycle something, it has a certain carbon footprint. We need energy. We need energy to collect that bottle, take it to a waste management centre, and then to change it and reuse it into a bottle. It's much better to refuse that plastic in the first place or to reuse it. And there's many, many initiatives like that. Perhaps don't use plastic. Maybe you could use a reusable lunchbox. You could have clothing which is made from natural fibres rather than plastic fibres. And perhaps try not to change your clothes too often. Try and keep the same clothes or even recycle them and send them to friends that you may know when you've grown out of them. So absolutely, there's so many initiatives we can use. Try to avoid buying food. Try that it is wrapped in plastic all the time. Perhaps try having a bag which you can reuse rather than having a plastic bag.
So we've just heard outlined some of the things that we can all do to reduce the amount of plastic that we use. Unfortunately, at the minute, I would say that we are limited by a lack of adequate design in a lot of products. It makes it challenging for them to be recycled or to be reused. So you are the next generation. This blue planet is yours for much longer, for many more years than I have left. And so it's going to be really important that we all work to protect it, and that's going to be important for you as the next generation too. So do the things you can to reduce, to reuse and recycle. But beyond that, where you find a problem, where you find a product that you can't currently recycle, then you need to challenge the manufacturers and you need to challenge your politicians to make the necessary changes. Because unfortunately at the moment, nearly all of the plastic products we have not been designed with end of life in mind. They've not been specifically designed for recycling or for reuse. The product designers, regrettably, have not really thought about that. So you need to put pressure on the government and on industry to try to make sure that the plastic is as compatible as possible with a more circular economy, with reduction in the amount of plastics that are used. And that will enable everybody to make more responsible use of plastics. Because at the moment, one of the challenges is a lack of complete design. As you go forward in your careers, maybe you want to design products, and perhaps you can work to make sure that you're designing them in a way that makes them use less plastic and be compatible with more circular, more sustainable use. If you're thinking of going forward in your career as a scientist like Penny and I, then where we really need scientific help is actually to test and evaluate some of those alternatives, some of the alternatives to the current plastic products. Because before we start to invest in those products and to sell them, we need to be absolutely confident that they perform better than the plastics that we've shown through our research create such a problem to the environment. That's the way forward, is to evidence that products work and are not harmful to the environment before we start to sell them on a global scale. It's that lack of thought that's caused the problem with the current levels of plastic pollution and the damage to the environment. So there's a lot of roles for you in your career, in the things that you do, and in putting pressure on industry and on governments to help to move things in the right direction so that society can get the benefits from plastic without the current levels of harm to the environment.
So I would suggest you need to be very informed and educated, and you can help others to do the same. It really helps if you can make that connection in the everyday choices that you make and the impact that might have on the environment. And if you know what you're doing, you can help others to do the same thing. Wherever possible, you can limit the amount of plastic that you use. Certainly, plastic is a really, really useful material and we do have to use it, but we don't have to use as much as we currently do so. Maybe you could talk to some people in the older generation, like your grandparents. They would have lived without plastic and they will be really innovative of what you can do. They're very used to having a basket or going to the market and shopping and not being so reliant on plastic. You could talk to them and follow some of their examples. I also think sometimes that this issue can seem too overwhelming, and actually you don't believe that what you do yourself would really make a difference. But that's not true. We absolutely all have to work on this together, and every little thing that you can do will help that be a ripple of change. You are definitely the generation that will shape the future of this beautiful planet of ours. Every choice and action that you make will determine that impact on the environment. You can help to fight plastic pollution, and it's really important to expand that crucial knowledge, to raise awareness and to take action. Together we can protect our planet and build a sustainable future.